The refrigerator hums in the kitchen, a low mechanical prayer that fills the spaces between our breathing. It's past midnight, and the living room exists in that particular darkness that comes after all the lights have been turned off except one, a table lamp in the corner casting everything in amber shadows. Owen and I are sprawled across my old couch, the one Vanessa always said we should replace, but never got around to. The cushions sag in familiar places, molded by years of Sunday football games and late-night conversations that stretched until dawn. I can feel the exhaustion in my bones. We spent the day moving furniture for his sister, hauling her life from one apartment to another in cardboard boxes and plastic bags. My shoulders ache from lifting her dresser up 3 flights of stairs. Owen's shirt is wrinkled, pushed up slightly where he's lying against the armrest, and I catch glimpses of his stomach when he shifts. I tell myself not to look, but my eyes drift there anyway, to the pale skin just above his belt line. The silence between us isn't uncomfortable. It never has been, not since we were 17 and driving back from basketball practice with the radio broken and nothing but highway stretching ahead. Owen has always been the kind of person who can sit quietly without needing to fill every moment with words. Tonight feels different, though. There's a weight to it, something pressing down on us both that I can't name. He's lying with his head against the opposite end of the couch, his legs tangled with mine somewhere in the middle. We've ended up like this before, too tired to move to separate chairs, too comfortable in each other's space to bother with the formalities of personal boundaries. But tonight, I'm hyper-aware of every point where our bodies touch. His ankle rests against my calf. His knee presses into my thigh. These small connections feel electric, charged with something I've been trying not to acknowledge for months. I study the ceiling, counting the cracks in the plaster that have been there since we moved in 8 years ago. Vanessa mentioned them again last week, adding them to the growing list of home improvements we never seem to find time for. Fix the ceiling, replace the couch, paint the guest room, install new fixtures in the bathroom. The list grows longer while our motivation shrinks, as if we're both waiting for someone else to care enough to make the first move. Owen shifts beside me, and I feel him turn his head in my direction. I don't look at him, but I know he's watching me. There's something about his gaze that I've always been able to sense, even with my eyes closed. It's steady and patient, like he's reading something written across my face in a language only he understands. "I don't cuddle, man," he says suddenly, his voice cutting through the quiet. The words are casual, almost throwaway, delivered with that half-smile he uses when he's making fun of himself. It's the kind of thing Owen says when he wants to establish boundaries while simultaneously ignoring them. I've heard variations of this disclaimer before. I'm not good with feelings. I don't do serious relationships. I'm not the settling down type, always followed by actions that contradict every word. I manage a quiet laugh, the sound barely audible over the refrigerator's persistent hum. "Sure you don't," I tell him, but I keep my eyes fixed on the ceiling. I've learned not to challenge Owen directly when he's drawing these invisible lines. He needs to maintain the illusion of distance, even when he's actively closing the space between us. Without ceremony, without explanation, he drapes his leg over both of mine. The movement is slow and deliberate, as if he's been thinking about it for the past 10 minutes and finally decided to stop overthinking. His calf settles across my shins, warm and solid and undeniably there. The gesture is so casual it could be accidental, but nothing about Owen is ever truly accidental. He calculates his spontaneity, measures his impulsiveness, delivers his contradictions with the precision of someone who has spent years perfecting the art of emotional sleight of hand. I don't move. I barely breathe. Something fundamental has shifted in the room. Some invisible line has been crossed, and I'm afraid that any sudden movement might break whatever spell has settled over us. His leg is heavy across mine, anchoring me to the couch, to this moment, to the terrible and wonderful realization that has been building in my chest for weeks. The lamp in the corner flickers slightly, a brief interruption in the amber light that throws our shadows into sharp relief against the wall. For a moment, I can see us clearly. 2 men in their 30s, sprawled across a sagging couch in a house that belongs to one of them, sharing a silence that feels both innocent and loaded with possibility. We look like friends. We look like something else entirely. The truth probably lies somewhere in the space between those two interpretations, in the gray area where most meaningful relationships actually exist. Owen's breathing has deepened, but I can tell he's not asleep. There's a deliberateness to his stillness, as if he's concentrating on something. His leg remains draped across mine, and I find myself cataloging the sensation, the weight of it, the warmth seeping through my jeans, the way it makes me feel both trapped and anchored. This is what I've been missing, I realize. This is what I've been wanting without knowing how to want it. My heart beats against something that feels like truth, like recognition, like the first crack in a wall I've spent years building and reinforcing. The contradiction of Owen's words and actions has always been there, I suppose, but tonight it feels significant in a way it never has before. Tonight it feels like an admission. I close my eyes and let myself feel the full weight of his leg across mine. I let myself acknowledge the warmth spreading through my chest, the way my breath catches slightly when he shifts. I let myself admit, just for a moment, that this feels like something I've been waiting for my entire adult life. The refrigerator continues its quiet humming. The lamp continues casting its amber light. Owen continues his careful pretense of not cuddling while doing exactly that. And I continue lying still, afraid to move, afraid to speak, afraid to do anything that might disturb this perfect, terrifying moment of almost honesty. In the morning, he'll probably make a joke about falling asleep on my couch. He'll stretch and yawn and act like nothing significant happened. He'll maintain his careful distance while his eyes linger on mine just a moment too long. And I'll play along because that's what we do. We perform this elaborate dance around the truth, circling closer and closer without ever quite touching it directly. But right now, in the dim quiet of this late night, with his leg warm across mine and the shadows shifting on the ceiling, I let myself feel the full weight of what's happening between us. I let myself acknowledge the crack in the wall, the first small fissure in a defense I've maintained for so long I'd forgotten it was even there. The refrigerator hums. Owen breathes. My heart beats against the truth. And for the first time in years, I don't try to push it away. I am 36 years old, and my life moves in careful circles. Each morning, I wake at 6:15 to the sound of Vanessa's alarm. She rises first, padding to the bathroom in her slippers while I lie in bed for exactly 5 more minutes, listening to the water run through the pipes behind our bedroom wall. The routine is so established that I could perform it unconscious. Coffee brewing, lunch packed, Miranda's backpack check for homework and permission slips. Our house sits on Maple Street in a neighborhood where every lawn is mowed on the same day and Christmas lights go up the weekend after Thanksgiving. The mailboxes are regulation height. The garbage cans are wheeled to the curb each Tuesday evening with military precision. I painted our front door blue 3 summers ago because Vanessa said it would look welcoming, but now I wonder who we were trying to welcome and whether they ever came. Inside, the walls are lined with photographs in matching frames. Miranda's school pictures progressing from gap-toothed kindergarten smiles to her current 11-year-old seriousness. Family vacations to places that looked better in the brochures. Christmas mornings where we all appear properly grateful for gifts we'd selected from online wish lists. Vanessa arranges these photos with the care of someone curating a museum exhibit about contentment. Sometimes I catch myself staring at them, searching for my own face among the carefully composed happiness. But the man in those pictures feels like someone I used to know. Vanessa and I have been married for 13 years. We met at a work conference where she was presenting research on sustainable urban planning, and I was pretending to understand municipal zoning laws. She wore a navy blazer and spoke with the confidence of someone who had never doubted her place in the world. When she agreed to dinner, I felt like I had passed some important test, though I was never quite sure what the correct answers had been. Our marriage operates with the efficiency of a well-maintained machine. We divide responsibilities fairly. She handles finances and social calendar management. I take care of home repairs and Miranda's transportation needs. We discuss vacation destinations and college savings plans. We attend parent-teacher conferences where Miranda's teachers praise her academic performance and her respectful attitude. We present a united front on matters of discipline and household rules. But lately, I noticed the spaces between our words growing larger. At breakfast, Vanessa mentions a work project while scrolling through her phone, and I respond with appropriate questions about deadlines and budgets. But neither of us looks up from our respective morning routines. Our conversations feel like scripts we've memorized, performed out of habit rather than genuine curiosity about each other's inner lives. Sunday dinners with her parents unfold in the same familiar pattern. Her father asks about my job at the county planning office. Her mother updates us on neighborhood gossip, and Vanessa mediates when topics drift toward politics or religion. I sit at their dining room table, eating pot roast and mashed potatoes, contributing the expected comments about property values and school district ratings. These people have known me for over a decade, yet I feel like I'm playing a character they've grown comfortable with, someone stable and predictable and entirely fictional. Owen exists outside these careful boundaries. Our friendship stretches back to junior year of high school, when he transferred from across town and somehow ended up assigned to the locker next to mine. He was taller than most of us, with an easy smile and a way of talking that made everything sound like the beginning of an adventure. We started hanging out after basketball practice, driving nowhere in particular while he told stories about places he'd lived before, 3 different states by the time he was 16 because his mother followed job opportunities the way other people followed weather patterns. He has never married, though he's had relationships that lasted months or sometimes years. He moves between apartments when leases expire or when he grows restless with familiar surroundings. His jobs have included bartender, construction worker, freelance graphic designer, and most recently, something involving software support for a company whose actual purpose he's never been able to explain to my satisfaction. He approaches employment the way he approaches everything else, with competence but without attachment, ready to walk away when the situation no longer serves him. I envy his freedom, though I would never say so out loud. He can decide on a Tuesday to drive to the coast for the weekend. He can quit a job that bores him without calculating mortgage payments and health insurance premiums. He can disappear for weeks and then resurface with stories about hiking trails or music festivals or people he met in coffee shops who change his perspective on something fundamental. But our friendship has endured through all these changes, anchored by something deeper than circumstance. We still call each other when we need someone to help move furniture or provide a second opinion on important decisions. We still fall into the same comfortable rhythms when we spend time together, sharing meals, watching games, talking until the conversation naturally winds down into comfortable silence. Recently, though, I've begun noticing things that feel different. The way Owen's laugh sounds when I tell certain stories. How his attention focuses when I'm speaking, as if he's listening for something specific beneath my words. The casual way he touches my shoulder when making a point, his hand lingering just long enough to register as intentional. These small moments lodge themselves in my memory like stones dropped into still water, creating ripples that reach places I didn't know existed. I find myself looking forward to his calls with an intensity that seems disproportionate to the circumstances. When his name appears on my phone screen, something lightens in my chest, as if the day has suddenly offered unexpected possibilities. We make plans to meet for drinks or catch a movie, and I realize I'm counting the hours between making the plan and carrying it out. These observations accumulate quietly beneath the surface of my ordinary days. While I'm sitting in traffic on my way to pick up Miranda from soccer practice, or standing in line at the grocery store, or lying awake beside Vanessa while she sleeps, I find myself thinking about Owen in ways that feel both familiar and entirely new. The truth is beginning to take shape in the spaces between my thoughts, and I'm not sure I'm ready to acknowledge what it might mean. The call comes on a Thursday evening while I'm washing dishes from dinner. Miranda is upstairs working on a science project about the solar system, and Vanessa is grading papers at the kitchen table, her red pen moving across student essays with practiced efficiency. The phone buzzes against the counter, and Owen's name appears on the screen like an answer to a question I hadn't known I was asking. "Hey," he says when I pick up, his voice carrying that particular energy he gets when he's had an idea. You busy this weekend? I glance at Vanessa, who looks up from her papers with mild curiosity. Just the usual, I tell him. Soccer game Saturday morning, grocery shopping, maybe some yard work if the weather holds. Cancel it, he says, and I can hear the grin in his voice. Well, not the soccer game, but the rest of it. I've got a situation. Owen's situations usually involve spontaneous road trips or concerts he's discovered at the last minute, or friends who need help with projects that sound more adventurous than they actually are. I've learned to listen with measured enthusiasm, knowing that his ideas often require more flexibility than my life typically allows. Remember Dave from college? He continues. He had this cabin up near Pine Ridge, about 2 hours north. Well, he still has it, and he invited a bunch of us up for the weekend. Hiking, fishing, sitting around a fire drinking beer, and pretending we're still 25. The works. I dry a plate with more attention than it requires, buying time to process the invitation. Weekend trips exist in a different category of possibility for me now, requiring negotiations with schedules and responsibilities that didn't exist when Owen and I were younger. Sounds nice, I say carefully. Who else is going? That's the thing. Dave had to cancel last minute. Work emergency. And Marcus can't make it because his kid has some recital. So it's basically just me and this empty cabin and a long weekend with nothing planned. Owen pauses, and I can picture him running his hand through his hair the way he does when he's trying to sound casual about something that matters to him. Thought maybe you'd want to come along, if you can swing it. Vanessa has stopped grading and is watching me with the expression she wears when she's trying to read between the lines of a conversation. I turn toward the sink, focusing on the remaining dishes while I consider Owen's offer. The idea pulls at something in my chest, a longing for the kind of unstructured time that used to define our friendship. I don't know, I start, but Owen cuts me off. Come on, man. When's the last time you did something just because you wanted to? No schedules, no obligations. Just a couple days to remember what it feels like to breathe. The question hits closer to home than I care to admit. I try to remember the last time I made plans based purely on desire rather than duty, and the memory feels distant, like something that happened to someone else. Vanessa clears her throat softly behind me, a sound that could mean anything or nothing. Let me think about it, I tell Owen, though part of me has already decided. Don't think too hard, he says. Sometimes the best decisions are the ones you make before you talk yourself out of them. After I hang up, Vanessa asks who that was, though she already knows. When I explain Owen's invitation, she sets down her pen and considers me with the careful attention she usually reserves for complex budget calculations. You should go, she says finally, and her voice carries something I can't quite identify. You've been working too hard lately. A break would do you good. There's truth in what she says, but there's also something else, something that feels like relief mixed with resignation. As if she's been waiting for me to want something enough to pursue it, even if that something takes me away from her. The thought unsettles me more than Owen's invitation does. Are you sure? I ask. It's Miranda's game on Saturday, and we were supposed to look at new kitchen cabinets. Miranda will understand, and the cabinets will still be there when you get back. She returns to her papers with a finality that suggests the conversation is over. Go have fun with Owen. You deserve it. I call Owen back an hour later, after Miranda has gone to bed and Vanessa has retreated to her office to finish her grading. Yes, I tell him simply, and he whoops loud enough that I have to hold the phone away from my ear. The cabin turns out to be exactly what I expected and nothing like I prepared for. It sits on a small lake surrounded by pine trees that seem to absorb sound, creating a pocket of quiet that feels almost sacred. The building itself is modest, 2 bedrooms, a main room with a stone fireplace, a kitchen equipped with the basics, and nothing more. The furniture is mismatched but comfortable, assembled over years by people who prioritize function over aesthetics. Owen arrived first and has already claimed the larger bedroom, though he offers to switch when I arrive with my duffel bag and a cooler full of beer. I tell him the smaller room is fine, and it is. Everything about this place feels right in a way I can't articulate, as if I've been holding my breath for months and can finally exhale. We spend the first evening cooking burgers on a charcoal grill that requires more attention than it should, drinking beer that tastes better than it has any right to, sharing stories we've told each other before, but somehow feel worth repeating in this setting. The conversation flows with the easy rhythm of old friendship, but underneath it, I sense something different, a charge in the air that might be my imagination or might be something real. When darkness falls, we build a fire in the fireplace and settle into chairs that have been positioned at the perfect distance for talking or not talking, as the mood requires. Owen tells me about a woman he's been seeing casually, someone who works at a bookstore and has strong opinions about authors I've never heard of. I tell him about Miranda's latest obsession with astronomy and how she's convinced that life exists somewhere else in the universe, just waiting for us to find the right way to look for it. Later, when the fire is burned down to glowing embers and we're both too tired to add another log, we migrate to the couch. It's smaller than mine at home, barely wide enough for two people, but we arrange ourselves without discussion or awkwardness. Owen settles against one end, and I take the other, our legs meeting somewhere in the middle. The familiarity of the position echoes that night on my couch, but here it feels different, less accidental, more intentional, as if we're both acknowledging something that was tentative before and is becoming more certain with each shared moment. "I don't cuddle, man," Owen says again, almost exactly as he did that night in my living room. But this time there's something playful in his voice, as if he's quoting himself, making fun of his own contradictions. This time, when he drapes his leg over mine, I don't pretend it's casual. This time, I let myself feel the full weight of what's happening between us. I return home on Sunday evening carrying something invisible but undeniably heavy. The house looks exactly as I left it. Same blue front door, same carefully tended flower beds, same sense of order that once felt comforting but now seems almost oppressive. Vanessa greets me at the door with a smile that doesn't quite reach her eyes, asking about the trip in the tone she uses when she wants information but doesn't want to seem too eager for it. "It was good," I tell her, which is both true and completely inadequate. I describe the cabin, the lake, the meals we cooked over the temperamental grill. I mention the hike we took through pine forest that seemed to stretch forever, how Owen got us lost for an hour because he insisted he knew a shortcut. I edit carefully, selecting details that paint a picture of ordinary male friendship, weekend adventure, nothing more complicated than two old friends enjoying some time away from their responsibilities. But even as I speak, I'm acutely aware of what I'm not saying. I don't mention the way Owen looked in the morning light streaming through the cabin windows, how the golden hours seemed to settle on his shoulders like benediction. I don't describe the moment when we were washing dishes together and our hands brushed under the soapy water, how the contact sent electricity up my arm that I felt for hours afterward. I don't tell her about the night we stayed up until 3 talking about everything and nothing, how the conversation moved through territory we'd never explored before, childhood fears, adult disappointments, the strange ache of living a life that feels like it belongs to someone else. Most of all, I don't mention how natural it felt to wake up with Owen's arm draped across my chest, how I lay still for 20 minutes just breathing in the rhythm of his sleep, memorizing the weight of him against me before he stirred and pulled away with an embarrassed laugh and some joke about the couch being too small for 2 grown men. Miranda appears in the kitchen while I'm unpacking my duffel bag, chattering about her weekend activities, a sleepover at her friend Jessica's house, a movie they watched about time travel, how Jessica's mom made pancakes shaped like dinosaurs. Her enthusiasm feels like sunlight after days in shadow, and I realize how much I missed her easy affection, the way she assumes my complete attention and usually receives it. But tonight, even as I listen to her stories and ask the appropriate follow-up questions, part of me remains at the cabin. Part of me is still sitting by the dying fire, watching Owen's face in the orange glow, feeling something shift between us that cannot be unnamed or undone. The next few days pass in a strange double exposure. I perform my regular life, morning coffee with Vanessa, evening homework supervision with Miranda, the Tuesday night grocery run that has become as fixed as a religious service. But underneath the familiar routines, the cabin lives in my skin like a fever. I find myself replaying moments with obsessive attention to detail. The way Owen's laugh sounded different in the mountain air. How his eyes lingered on mine when he thought I wasn't looking. The careful choreography of our shared space. How we moved around each other with an awareness that felt both new and ancient. My phone buzzes with messages from Owen throughout the week. Thanks for coming up, man. Needed that more than I realized. Followed by a photo of the lake taken from the cabin's front porch. Empty Adirondack chairs positioned to face the water like they're waiting for us to return. Then, 2 days later, found your book in the car. Some thriller you never finished. Wanting to drop it by. I stare at that message for longer than it deserves, parsing it for hidden meaning. The book is just an excuse, obviously. I could tell him to keep it or throw it away. But the thought of seeing him again, of having a reason to continue whatever began at the cabin, fills me with anticipation that feels dangerous and necessary in equal measure. Sure, I text back. Tomorrow evening works if you're free. When Vanessa asks who I'm texting, I tell her it's Owen about some book I left in his car. She nods absently, already turning her attention to the stack of papers she's brought home from work. Her disinterest should feel like relief, but instead it highlights the growing distance between us, the way we've learned to coexist without truly seeing each other. Owen arrives the next evening, just as I'm finishing dinner cleanup. He stands in my kitchen holding the paperback Thriller, and the sight of him in this domestic space creates a dissonance that makes my chest tight. He belongs to the cabin, to mountain lakes and pine forests, to conversations that stretch past midnight. Seeing him here, surrounded by family photos and mortgage payments, and the careful architecture of my established life, feels like witnessing a collision between two different versions of myself. We talk for maybe 10 minutes about nothing important, work, weather, Miranda's latest academic achievements. But underneath the ordinary words, I feel the weight of everything we're not saying. When he leaves, he clasps my shoulder in what could be interpreted as a casual gesture of friendship, but his hand lingers just long enough to register as something more deliberate. That night, lying in bed beside Vanessa while she sleeps, I replay the brief pressure of Owen's hand against my shoulder. I think about the cabin, about the version of myself that existed there for 2 days, someone freer, more honest, more alive than the man who pays mortgages and attends parent-teacher conferences and pretends that contentment and happiness are the same thing. I think about Owen's contradictions, how he insists he doesn't do intimacy while consistently choosing connection, how he claims not to cuddle while pulling me close in sleep. I think about my own contradictions, how I've built a life around safety and predictability while yearning for something I've never been able to name. The cabin changed something fundamental, cracked open a door I didn't know existed. Now I'm left carrying this new awareness through my ordinary days, trying to reconcile who I've always been with who I might be becoming. The weight of it is both terrifying and oddly exhilarating, like standing at the edge of a cliff and realizing that falling might feel like flying. The revelation arrives on an ordinary Thursday evening, disguised as nothing more significant than two friends sharing beer on a balcony. Owen had called earlier in the day while I was reviewing building permits at work, asking if I wanted to come by his apartment after dinner. Something in his voice suggested the invitation meant more than casual socializing, though I couldn't articulate what that something might be. I tell Vanessa I'm going to Owen's place to help him look at a lease renewal, which is partly true. He had mentioned some issue with his landlord raising the rent, though when I arrive at his apartment, no paperwork is visible anywhere. Instead, he hands me a cold beer and gestures toward the sliding door that leads to his small balcony overlooking the city. Owen's apartment exists in a state of perpetual transition. He's lived here for almost 2 years, but the walls remain mostly bare except for a few photographs he's never bothered to frame properly. His furniture looks temporary, as if he's always prepared to pack everything into boxes and move on to the next chapter. Tonight, though, something feels different about the space. Settled, somehow, as if he's finally stopped planning his next escape. We settle into the 2 folding chairs he keeps on the balcony, positioned close enough for conversation, but angled to take advantage of the view. Below us, the city spreads out in a grid of lights and movement. Traffic moves along the main arteries like blood through veins, and somewhere in the distance, a train horn echoes off the buildings. The sound is lonely and comforting at the same time, like most things about urban evenings. Owen talks about work for a while, describing some project involving database migration that sounds more complicated than it probably is. I tell him about Miranda's latest obsession with learning guitar, how she practices scales every evening until Vanessa starts hinting about noise ordinances and consideration for neighbors. The conversation moves easily between topics, but underneath it I sense something gathering, like pressure building before a storm. The silence that eventually falls between us feels different from our usual comfortable quiet. This one carries weight, anticipation, the sense that we're both waiting for something to be acknowledged. Owen takes a long drink from his beer and stares out at the city lights for a moment before speaking. You ever feel like we missed something? He says, his voice so quiet I almost don't catch the words. His eyes remain fixed on the skyline, as if the question is addressed to the night rather than to me specifically. I ask him what he means, though part of me already knows. Part of me has known for weeks, maybe longer, that this conversation was inevitable. Owen doesn't answer immediately. Instead, he shifts in his chair and rests his arm along the back of mine, his fingers grazing my shoulder in a gesture that could be casual, but isn't. The touch is barely there, so light it might be accidental, but I feel it like a confession. His fingertips rest against the fabric of my shirt, warm through the cotton, and suddenly the evening air feels charged with possibility. Neither of us moves to break the contact, and the silence stretches between us like a bridge we're both afraid to cross. I don't know, he says finally, still not looking at me directly. Just sometimes I think about roads not taken, you know? Choices we made without realizing we were making them. The city continues its evening business below us. Cars navigate intersections. Windows glow with the blue light of television screens. People move through their lives unaware that two men are sitting 6 stories above them, balanced on the edge of changing everything. Owen's fingers remain against my shoulder, a point of contact that feels both natural and revolutionary. We finish our beers in contemplative quiet, then move inside when the evening air grows cool. Owen's living room is lit by a single lamp in the corner, creating the same kind of amber atmosphere that seems to follow us wherever we end up together. We settle on his couch, which is newer than mine, but somehow feels more familiar, as if we've been having this exact conversation for years without realizing it. I'm telling him something about a zoning dispute at work when I notice he's not really listening. His attention is focused on my face with an intensity that makes me lose track of my own words. I stop mid-sentence, suddenly aware of the space between us, how small it is, how easily it could be closed. For a suspended moment, we simply look at each other. No words, no movement, just the recognition passing between us like current through water. In that silence, everything I've been trying not to acknowledge crystallizes into absolute clarity. This is what I've been feeling. This is what I've been wanting. This is the truth I've been circling around for months without having the courage to name it directly. Owen's gaze moves from my eyes to my mouth and back again, a gesture so subtle it might be involuntary, but I catch it. The air between us feels thick with possibility and danger, charged with all the things we haven't said and might never say out loud. My heart pounds against my ribs like something trying to escape, and I realize that this moment has been building since that first night on my couch, maybe since long before that. I have loved Owen all my life. The realization hits me with the force of something that has always been true but never been acknowledged. Not the easy love of friendship, though that's part of it. Something deeper, more complicated, more necessary. Something that explains the way I've always felt most like myself in his presence. The way his approval has always mattered more than anyone else's. The way his absence creates a specific kind of loneliness that nothing else can fill. And sitting here in his living room, watching him watch me with that careful intensity, I understand that Owen may have always known. Not in words, perhaps, but in the quiet language of proximity and attention, in the way he's always found reasons to stay close, to maintain contact, to create moments like this one where the truth can exist without being spoken. The knowledge settles into my chest like something I've been carrying without realizing its weight. I love Owen. I have always loved Owen, and in this amber light, surrounded by the careful distance he maintains from permanent things, I begin to suspect that he might love me too. The truth, once acknowledged, refuses to return to the shadows. In the days following that evening on Owen's balcony, I carry the weight of recognition through my ordinary life like a stone in my chest. Everything looks the same. The breakfast table where Vanessa reads news headlines aloud, the carpool line at Miranda's school, the evening ritual of homework supervision and dinner preparation. But I move through these familiar spaces feeling like a stranger in my own existence. Vanessa notices first. She has always been observant, trained by years of teaching to recognize when someone's attention has drifted from the task at hand. At breakfast on Saturday morning, she watches me push eggs around my plate while Miranda chatters about her upcoming science fair project, something involving plant growth and different types of music. "You're somewhere else," Vanessa says after Miranda leaves to get ready for soccer practice. Her voice carries the careful neutrality she uses when she suspects a conversation might lead somewhere difficult. "Everything okay?" I tell her I'm fine, just tired from work, but the lie sits awkwardly between us. Vanessa has known me for too long to be satisfied with such simple deflection. She studies my face with the patience of someone who has learned that silence often produces more honest answers than direct questioning. The soccer game passes in a blur of missed plays and parental commentary I can't focus on. I watch Miranda run across the field with her usual determined intensity, but my thoughts keep drifting to Owen, to the way his fingers felt against my shoulder, to the recognition that passed between us in his living room, to the terrible certainty that everything I thought I understood about my life has shifted fundamentally. That evening, while Miranda is at a sleepover and the house feels too quiet, Vanessa finds me standing in the kitchen staring out the window at our backyard. The lawn needs mowing. The fence could use a fresh coat of stain. These observations feel surreal, as if I'm cataloging the details of someone else's life. "Caleb," she says, and something in her tone makes me turn around. She's standing in the doorway holding a cup of tea, her expression serious but not unkind. "We need to talk." The conversation that follows is both worse and better than I expected. Vanessa settles across from me at the kitchen table, the same table where we've discussed mortgage refinancing and vacation plans and Miranda's academic progress. But tonight, the familiar space feels like neutral territory in a negotiation neither of us wants to have. "There's someone else, isn't there?" she says, and it's not really a question. Her voice is steady, but I can see the effort it costs her to maintain that composure. I want to deny it, to deflect with the same vague reassurances I've been offering for weeks. But sitting here facing her directly, seeing the careful way she's holding herself together, I realize that lies will only make everything worse. The truth may be complicated and painful, but it's the only thing I have left to offer. "Yes," I tell her, "but it's not what you think." She asks me to explain what I mean, and I struggle to find words for something I'm still learning to understand myself. How do I tell my wife of 13 years that the someone else is a man? That I've been in love with my best friend for most of my adult life without fully realizing it? That everything about our marriage, while genuine, has been built on an incomplete understanding of who I am. "It's Owen," I say finally, the words feeling both enormous and insufficient. I don't know what that means yet, or what I'm going to do about it, but I can't pretend anymore that it's not true. The silence that follows stretches between us like a chasm. Vanessa sets down her tea with careful precision, and I watch her process this information, her face cycling through emotions I can't entirely read. Surprise, yes, but also something that might be relief mixed with grief. "How long?" she asks. "I don't know," I tell her honestly. "Maybe always. I just didn't have words for it before." The conversation continues past midnight, moving through territory we've never explored together. Vanessa asks questions I don't know how to answer. What does this mean for our marriage? For Miranda? For the life we've built together? I tell her I don't know, which is the only honest response I can offer, but I understand that not knowing isn't enough anymore. 2 days later, I drive to Owen's apartment with no clear plan beyond the need to stop living in the space between truth and acknowledgement. I find him on his balcony again, reading something on his phone, a beer growing warm on the small table beside his chair. "We need to talk," I tell him, and he looks up with an expression that suggests he's been expecting this conversation. "I know," he says simply, and gestures to the empty chair beside him. I sit down and try to find words for everything that's been building inside me since that moment of recognition in his living room. I tell him about the conversation with Vanessa, about the impossible weight of living with truth I can no longer ignore. I tell him that I love him, not just as a friend, but as something deeper and more necessary, something that explains every important moment of our friendship in a new light. Owen listens without interrupting, his attention focused entirely on my words. When I finish speaking, he's quiet for a long time, staring out at the city lights below us. "I don't know what I want," he says finally. "I've never been good at wanting things that require promises. But you matter more to me than anyone ever has, and that scares the hell out of me." The admission hangs between us like a bridge half-built, leading somewhere neither of us can see clearly. We sit in the growing darkness, two men who have spent decades circling around this truth, finally acknowledging what has always existed beneath the surface of our friendship. The choice ahead feels impossible. Preserve the life I've built on expectations and safety, or risk everything for a truth that offers no guarantees. But sitting here beside Owen, feeling the weight of honesty between us, I realize that the choice has already been made. The only question now is whether I have the courage to follow it to its conclusion. 3 weeks later, Vanessa finds my wedding ring on the kitchen counter beside a half-finished cup of coffee that has grown cold in the morning light. I didn't place it there with ceremony or declaration. There was no dramatic moment of removal, no symbolic gesture of rejection. I simply took it off while washing dishes the night before, set it down beside the sink, and in the morning it remained there like a small golden period at the end of a sentence I'd been writing for 13 years. She stands in the doorway holding her own coffee, still wearing the terry cloth robe she's had since we were first married. For a moment we both stare at the ring as if it might explain itself, offer some guidance for what comes next. But objects hold no wisdom, only the weight of what we choose to invest in them. "I didn't know you decided," she says finally, her voice carrying neither surprise nor accusation. We've had so many conversations over these past weeks that perhaps this small abdication feels more like conclusion than beginning. "I didn't know either," I tell her, which is true. The decision happened gradually, in accumulated moments of recognition rather than a single instant of choice. Waking up each morning and feeling like I was performing a role that no longer fit. Sitting across from her at dinner and realizing that we'd both been pretending contentment was the same as happiness. Lying beside her in bed and understanding that my love for her, while genuine, had always been incomplete. The practical conversations that follow are surprisingly civil. We discuss custody arrangements for Miranda, who will stay primarily with Vanessa in the house while I find an apartment nearby. We talk about division of assets and shared responsibilities with the emotional distance of business partners, dissolving a company that was successful but never quite profitable. These details feel both crucial and irrelevant, necessary scaffolding around a change that has already taken place in more fundamental ways. Miranda takes the news with the resilience children sometimes demonstrate when adult certainties crumble around them. She asks practical questions about where I'll live and whether she can still have sleepovers at Jessica's house. She wants to know if this means she's getting 2 Christmas celebrations and whether both homes will have Wi-Fi for her online games. Her ability to focus on logistics rather than emotional devastation suggests a pragmatism I hope serves her well in the years ahead. Owen's apartment feels different when I arrive with a single suitcase and a cardboard box containing the few possessions that seemed worth carrying into this new version of my life. The space that once felt temporary now appears almost permanent, as if I've been expected here all along. Owen helps me carry my things upstairs without commentary about the smallness of what I've chosen to keep or the enormity of what I've left behind. We don't talk about what this means what we're doing, what kind of future we're stepping into together. Owen has never been comfortable with grand declarations or 5-year plans, and I'm learning to appreciate the freedom that comes from moving forward without requiring guarantees. We arrange my clothes in half of his closet, make space for my books on his shelves, and establish the quiet rhythms of shared domestic life without fanfare or official announcements. The first morning I wake up in Owen's bed feels both surreal and inevitable. Sunlight streams through windows that face east instead of west, casting familiar shadows in unfamiliar patterns. Owen lies beside me with the unconscious sprawl of someone who has finally stopped maintaining careful distance, his arm draped across my chest with the same casual intimacy he once denied practicing. I don't move for a long time, content to catalog the sensation of breathing without restraint. For the first time in years, maybe decades, I feel no need to be anywhere else or anyone else. The weight of Owen's arm against my ribs anchors me to this moment, to this choice, to this quiet revolution that began with a contradiction on a couch and culminated in the simple act of removing a ring. When Owen eventually stirs, he doesn't pull away with embarrassment or make jokes about limited space. Instead, he tightens his hold slightly and mumbles something about coffee that might be a question or might just be wishful thinking. We lie there in the growing light, two men who have finally stopped pretending that friendship was the only thing binding them together. Later, over breakfast at his small kitchen table, Owen asks if I'm okay with everything being so undefined, so uncertain. He's never offered promises before, he reminds me, and he's not sure he knows how to start now. I tell him that I've spent most of my adult life living according to other people's definitions of what my happiness should look like, and that maybe uncertainty is exactly what I need. The future remains unwritten. We haven't discussed marriage or joint bank accounts or any of the conventional markers of committed relationships. We haven't made announcements to family or friends about what we are to each other, partly because neither of us has adequate vocabulary for it yet. We exist in the space between friendship and romance, in a territory where love takes whatever form it needs to take. But for the first time in years, I breathe without measuring each inhalation. I move through days guided by desire rather than duty. I fall asleep beside someone who has seen every version of me and chosen to stay anyway. The transformation is quiet, unremarkable to outside observation. Two men sharing an apartment, splitting grocery bills, taking turns cooking dinner. Nothing that would make headlines or inspire dramatic proclamations about the nature of love. Yet everything has changed. I have finally stepped into the truth of who I am, fragile and imperfect and undeniably real. And in this small apartment with mismatched furniture and morning light streaming through east-facing windows, I'm learning what it means to live without apology, to love without reservation, to breathe without restraint. It is enough, more than enough. It is everything.